Hello and welcome to my brand new podcast. I'm Nicky Raby and I'm thrilled that you're joining us. I do lots of things. I'm an actor, coach, writer, speaker and a mum. And in my coaching work, I work with creatives, personal brands, freelancers and small businesses. In this podcast, I want to talk about success, but not in the traditional sense. I want to bring you conversations that discuss success, what it means, and how there are many different versions. We're going to be talking about business, branding, becoming visible, saying no, saying yes, and how you can create a thriving portfolio career doing more of what you love and less of what you don't. Sometimes there can be a certain mystery around the online world, so I'm going to be asking my guests how they started and grew, how they get paid, how they stand out, and how they create success on their terms. As always, please check the show notes for all things we mention and come and say hi over on social media at Nicky Raby or via my website nickyraby.com/podcast. In today's episode, I'm talking to Annie Ridout, who is the founder and the editor of The Early Hour. She's a freelance journalist for The Guardian, Red Magazine, stylist, and also a copywriter for Clementine app, a baby centre blogger, and a speaker. And she's spoken on BBC Radio and TV, Stylist Live, and also she's a mum of two. So life is busy. In this episode, we're going to be talking all about how to pitch, how to get in the press, how to stand out and be noticed, and also use social media to continue the conversation and build a community around you. I hope you enjoy the episode. Hi Annie, how are you?
Good, thank you.
Lovely to have you. Thanks so much for being on the podcast. I'm sure people have seen you on Instagram and visited your site, but if they haven't, tell us all a little bit about what you do and what you're all about.
I am founder and editor of The Early Hour, which is a digital parenting and lifestyle magazine with articles that go out early in the morning. And I'm a freelance journalist, copywriter, blogger. So I've written for The Guardian and Stylist magazine, Red Magazine, and I write all the copy for a fairly new app called Clementine, which is amazing, an app for women. So I do lots of different freelance work, and I'm kind of branching out into doing a bit of PR and social media management. So
fantastic. Yeah. I would love to know how you started The Early Hour, because I think it's one of those games that we all used to play when we were little, where you'd have your Fisher-Price little till and, you know, a nice notebook, and you'd be like, yeah, I'm working on my magazine. But, you know, you actually did it and you launched it. How was that process for you, and how did you get clear on the idea to begin with?
I started blogging years ago. I had a blog called Annie Loves, and it was basically just an online diary. And this was like when blogs first came out, people were still saying, what on earth is a blog? And that, and I did it as a way to store my thoughts and to have a bit of an online presence, but I didn't know anything about SEO or growing an audience. But I did have a few hundred views a day, which I didn't realize at the time was quite good.
Yes.
And so then I just carried on doing it and I shared it on Facebook amongst friends. And back then you could share something on Facebook and of course it would spread. All your friends would see it because they didn't have the algorithm thing and they didn't have paid for posts. It was a different experience. So I had that blog, and then I did a journalism master's, and I started writing some local news stuff, and then I'm writing for other websites, but always liked the first person blogging. So I then moved back to London. I'd been living in Somerset for a while, moved back to London, set up a new website, annieridout.com, and had a fresh blog. And it was a bit more serious, a bit less. I was still in there, but less about what outfit I was wearing that day and more about what book I was reading or what feminist march I wanted to go on.
Yes.
So
and what you would be wearing to that feminist march.
Yeah, probably. And then I carried on writing for other people because that was where the money was. I never tried to monetize my own blog, but got to a point where I was doing lots of work for other people and and wondered if actually I now had the experience to launch something of my own, which I could make money from. And I, by this point, had a baby, my daughter, who's now 3. But when she was 1, I decided to launch my own digital magazine, which some people still refer to as a blog. And in some ways, it's got a sort of bloggy feel to it because it is quite personal in some ways. But I liked the idea of it being a bit wider than that. And it wouldn't just be my voice and about my life. It would be interviewing lots of other people about their experience of particularly parenting, but other sort of lifestyle areas. So I wrote loads of content, interviewed loads of people. I think I got probably 20 articles ready to go, and maybe another 20 in drafts. And I launched the early hour with one article going out every day at 5 a.m.
Wow. And how it is now, and the sort of the flavour and the tone and the style of it, is that how it began, or has it shifted and changed as you have?
I think it's definitely changed because I launched and I kind of wanted it to be for everyone who was up early. So I'd started it because I'd had these early mornings breastfeeding my daughter and scrolling through my phone, and there was stuff for me to read, but I would have read it yesterday when I was breastfeeding her in the afternoon on the Guardian or Stylist or whatever websites I was getting reading my articles on. But then I had a meeting with this mentor I used to have, who said, well, I'm an older woman, but I'm up early because I'm going through the menopause, and there are loads of other people who could read your content. So I decided to make it really broad and sort of make it a lot about mornings and sort of lifestyle in general. And then I realized over time that the people following and who were really interested were, sorry, my baby's just come home early.
This is life. This is life.
This is life. So if he doesn't start crying. Yeah, so I realised that actually my followers were parents because they were on the same journey I was on. They were, when I was talking about potty training or sleepless nights, they were relating and finding that useful or funny or it made them feel better. So I decided then to go back to my initial idea, which was to focus more on parents and speak to them. So it's kind of, it started quite narrow and then it broadened out a bit and then it's narrowed down a bit and then it's almost like ready to become a bit broader again, I think.
And how have you grown it so quickly? Because I think sometimes when I speak to clients who are looking at starting a business or monetizing their blog or having a creative output, they may say things like, well, hasn't this been done before, or isn't it, full up, as it were? Is the industry full up? How have you stood out and stood the test of time as well and regularly grown?
I think that's an interesting comment that you made about, doesn't it already exist? Because I did a Prince's Trust business course, and one of the first things the teacher said was, your idea almost certainly already exists, but that's fine. It's how you execute it. So I knew that there were parenting bloggers, there were other online magazines for parents, there were definitely other similar things. So the idea of putting articles out early in the morning was my USP. But also I realized it's about creating a voice that people trust and like, and a community. And so even if you're doing something that someone else is doing, you can do it better, and you can do it in a slightly different way. And I think there's such a big parenting thing at the moment. It's massive on Instagram, all the Insta mums and dads, and with people engaging with parenting in a different way, and the sort of work-life juggle with lots of mothers going back to work now and wanting flexible working. There are so many interesting conversations going on that I think there's space for lots of different sort of voices, lots of blogs and websites, which,
I agree.
Tell different stories.
Sometimes people need to hear it from you. It's I always use this analogy with clients of like, I didn't really get science in year 7 and 8, and then in year 9 I had a cracking teacher, and I was just like, oh, I understand it, finally. This is
Yes.
great. And,
Yes.
wanted just to be her friend. She was a bit peculiar, so I didn't really. But, she just said it in a way that I wanted to. I mean, the blogging platform is fantastic for communicating with customers and audience and building that community. And I know that not everybody is a natural writer, but sometimes there can be that pressure to create content. How would you practically find your voice if you weren't really sure how to begin?
So I've had two people have come to me recently who want to blog and are finding it hard to not just to find their voice, but to feel confident that what they're writing isn't. One woman who's launching a business said, I want to put out my first blog. Can you just read it before I promote it to tell me I don't sound really stupid? And
I've had to close my eyes sometimes when I've pressed publish, especially in the early days.
Oh, really?
I can't believe that these thoughts are going out onto the internet.
Oh, really? That's funny. I think because I've been doing it for so long,
yes,
I don't, and I think because I find it much easier to express myself in writing than I probably do in words or in person. So for me, it's always been really easy to get it out there. So I have to sometimes take a step back and imagine how it would feel to feel that that's really exposing.
Yes.
And so with the few people who've come to me recently asking for advice, I think that you're the only person who can find your voice, and your voice should be sort of similar. If it's a personal brand, should be similar to the voice you would use with your friends or to talk about anything. So I can develop a voice for a brand if it's a faceless brand. If there's a person behind, like with the early hour, I'm the face of it. It needs to be true to me and true to my values and true to the way I speak in real life. If suddenly I was, popping all these words into articles and I didn't know what they meant, when people then met me in real life, they'd think I was thick and they'd see that I was thick. So I think it's got to be sincere. It's got to be just really about you, but it can help to have someone with experience look over what you're doing and tweak it. And even with another of my clients, she writes blogs and I edit them. And in time, I'm seeing that she is starting to write in the same way that I'm editing. So where once she was coming and there was lots of changes, now she'll give me something and it just doesn't need so many changes because she started to see together we've created this voice and this way of writing blogs, and she just totally gets it.
That's brilliant. And she gets lots of smiley faces at the end after you finished it. Like, yes, you've done very well.
No, I'm not a fan of emojis.
No. Sometimes there's just so many that I just think, gosh, it's taken me so long to actually write the copy. I can't find the perfect thing that I need. So,
do you know, that's a funny thing. It's slightly off topic, but whenever people submit an article to the early hour, I have to say, I've got a little list of guidelines and I have to say, sorry if this is patronizing, but please don't use any emojis and be sparing with exclamation marks. And then I have to say, I do understand why people want to use them, because we're so used to using them in text and in Instagram posts and things to convey an emotion. But actually there are always words that can do that. And you've got to sometimes try and find a different way of saying it without, I find it quite interesting.
Thesaurus out, don't resolve bag. I remember my dad buying me a dictionary before I went to secondary school, but I didn't get my locker until, I don't know, the second term or something, and I was so worried about not having all the right stuff. So I had like my PE kit, I had my swimming kit, I had my dictionary, I had like all the things, and I was such a titch as well at school, so I was just always loaded down. I would love to know more about actually pitching, and I know that you've had some fantastic writers, myself included. I'm not putting myself in that category, but how would you say would you write a really great pitch that is not only going to stand out, but give options, I would say, because sometimes I've had moments where I've pitched something and the editor has really enjoyed it, but they need something else from me, which is a different flavour. So I'd love you to chat about that. That would be really useful.
About if you want, like on a kind of PR side of things.
If you see a magazine, say for example the Early Hour, and you think, oh, actually that would be really aligned, how would somebody get your attention?
So the way that I pitch my articles, or if I'm doing PR for someone else, is informed by the way people pitch to me, and I guess that's what you're asking. So for the Early Hour, what I really like is if someone wants me to talk about their product or their business, or if they want to write an article for the Early Hour, then it's nice. Well, the subject line is the first thing, and it needs to be something that grabs my attention, but not in a really annoying, gimmicky way. Like, don't use all capital letters. So many PR people do that, and it's really annoying. Don't use loads of exclamation marks. Don't use emojis. Just do something like, so if it were you, maybe you'd want to be writing about how to find the perfect work-life balance. So in a subject line, I'd say, I have the secret to the perfect work-life balance.
Great.
And so then within the email, always use the editor's name or the journalist's name. So, dear Annie, and if you can find some of their writing or something about the publication you're asking to be featured in and comment on it, that really helps. So I always do it. I'd always say, I've just seen this article you wrote in The Guardian and it was so good. I love this about it. And it's endearing, yourself to the editor, because otherwise you're a complete stranger, and it can feel like people are PR people often do just sort of shove out press releases, and it's really impersonal, and I just delete them immediately if it comes through and it's not got my name on it, so they haven't thought about it working really well for the Early Hour specifically, then I just delete it without reading it at all. And I'm sure lots of other editors do the same thing. So find something personal to talk about. It could be a tweet that they've written or an Instagram post. It could be an article they've edited or put out. And then just I've done it in different ways, but I think probably a really good paragraph is enough. I wouldn't attach anything, because the likelihood is they're not going to open a press release. I wouldn't paste your whole press release in, because they're not going to spend ages reading it. And unless it's a really good story, like Kim Palmer, who set up Clementine, who I write the copy for, she gets away with writing quite long emails to editors because her story is so captivating.
Yes.
It's a real, she takes you on a real journey. But I'd say most people and most ideas aren't quite as, it's got to be, if it's really personal, then I think write the whole journey, but still try to keep it as brief as possible. And if it's something more general, like if you were to write the work-life article I made up for you earlier, just a paragraph.
I look forward to that article.
A paragraph about who you are, what the article idea is, and why you're the best person to write it.
Yes, that's so good, because actually the paragraph has to be relevant to not only who you are and where you are right now. And when I was an agent working with actors, you'd often get these long-winged ideas of I first found my love of acting when I was in a school assembly, and you think actually it's not relevant right now.
No.
To get to the point.
Exactly.
I would love to talk a bit more about monetizing and how you can work with brands and collaborate, because I feel like, the guidelines are emerging as we speak, the sponsored posts and the ads and things like that. But if somebody had been writing for a while and was looking to use their writing as perhaps an income stream, what would be the steps that they would take?
So there are different routes, but if, for instance, you are writing a personal blog about your motherhood experience, it's always good to grow a bit of a following, but also pay attention to the way the aesthetic of your blog. That really matters to the way you're writing. So do develop a voice for yourself. Make sure there are no typos or grammatical errors. You've got to really proofread, because it just puts people off working with you. It looks really unprofessional if you're putting stuff out there that's got errors. So make sure everything looks really good. It reads really well. Share it as much as you can on social media. Get as many followers as you can. And then I'd say you can do things like there's Affiliate Window, I think it's called, which is a website, and you sign up and you put a bit of code into your if you're using WordPress, for instance, put a bit of code into WordPress and adverts pop up, and then you get paid every time. I don't think it's a click-through thing. It's more once someone's clicked through and bought something from Gap, then you get 1% of the sales. Something. Yeah, it's like it's not a good way to do it unless you have loads of followers who really trust you and who. Well, the idea is, I suppose, you have those adverts coming up, and then you could do something like, say it was Gap, then you could have an article all about the best clothes for kids to wear in the summer, and you could have a few Gap items, and then when they click through, you'd also get money. But that, I think when you're starting out, that's not the best route. The best thing to do is to be really bold and just approach people and ask them if they'd like to write a sponsored post, or if they'd like to sponsor you in some way, or work together on a campaign. I think probably, cold calling is the much harder but more lucrative way to go.
Sharing your personality and showing how you're different is so key as well, that you can try and just replicate what everybody else has done, but actually doing your own thing is far easier, I would say. And in terms of you having these many strings to your bow, which are all sort of the same flavour, what's the best thing about your lifestyle and this new phase of your career?
Well, since I've started, for a long time, I was focusing all my energy on the early hour, but have always been mostly a mother and working part time. So I've only ever had 2 days of childcare with any one child. I've now got 2 kids, so my eldest is in full time childcare, but I've only got 2 days of childcare for the younger one. So I realised really recently at the beginning of this year that I needed to step back from the early hour in terms of content. So put out a bit less content, push it a bit more on social media, but focus on the stuff that brings in the money. So rather than looking for sales opportunities via the early hour, which, sponsored posts and things, they do bring in money, but I have to act as a salesperson, and that's not what I want to do. I want to be a writer and an editor.
Yes.
So I decided to stop pushing that side of things and to instead turn to freelance work and do consultancy and PR and social media and writing and editing for other people, which not only brings in money immediately, but also there's an end to it. It's a project. So I'm asked to write an article and I write it and I send it off and that's it. And then I'm paid. Whereas the early hour is just this thing that it's always there and it's ongoing. And I love it for that. And I'm continuing to grow it, which is really exciting. And it does grow month on month. And the community side of it really excites me, and people getting engaged and starting conversations. But that can carry on without me putting 90% of my effort into that. I want to be putting maybe 20% of my effort into that and 80% into the stuff that just pays me right now, because I've got childcare costs and house costs and,
life.
So life costs. So I want to have, and so now I'm creating a bit of a portfolio of clients, regular clients who pay me good money to work for them each week. And that's now my childcare hours. And then the sort of not superfluous, it's still important, but the stuff that's more for me, like the early hour, like my personal writing, creative writing, that's evening stuff and nap time stuff and times when I don't have childcare.
Fantastic. And it's so refreshing actually because I remember you writing the post about how you were shifting and in terms of your content schedule, and it was so I could almost feel the sense of relief from reading it.
Oh, really?
But I guess because I related to it myself, that sometimes as a creative person, you come up with so many ideas and so many different angles, and you're always in that idea zone. But actually, once you have children, there's other things that you need to do as well, and it can be full on. I would love to know if there's any books that you've read in terms of business or self-development, and any books that have sort of changed the direction or given you something that has changed the way that you move forward. I have loads of business books. The first one I read, it's not so much a business book, but Sheryl Sandberg's Lean In, which is a famous one about women putting themselves forward and not thinking that they can't be
at the table, both literally and metaphorically. So I read that, and then at the time I had a full-time job as a copywriter, and I started asking for pay rises and getting them and that really worked well for me at the time, in sort of empowering me and reminding me that just because I was a woman and just because I might have children at some point in the future, I was still a valuable member of the team.
Absolutely.
And I became pregnant and asked for another pay rise, and I remember my dad saying, I don't think you should be asking for a pay rise. Just try and hold on to your job. You're pregnant. You can have a baby. And I was like, no, I think you're wrong. So I went in and asked for more money and got it, because why wouldn't I? I was still able to write copy, even if I was pushing further and further away from the desk.
Things. It's kind of, the different kind of voices. This is why, I could go on a whole big rant here, but, having those different voices at the table and different life experiences is so important.
Exactly. Absolutely. So that Sheryl Sandberg book I found really good. And I'm reading her second one at the moment about resilience. I can't remember what it's called. Plan A or B? Option B? Option B. Resilience. Option B. Yeah, and it's so, oh my God, the opening is the saddest thing I've ever read in my life. But I just like the way she talks. I know there's lots of criticisms about her kind of class and not understanding people, but if you are able to sort of push that aside, she's got some really good points, being the COO of Facebook, about how to succeed in life.
Yeah, exactly.
But apart from that, I'm not a massive business book person because I never have enough time to read a whole book. So I'm much more into articles. And even then, there's not one website that I go to. I go to Business Insider or entrepreneur.com, The Guardian, anywhere. But it's more stuff that pops up on social media. And I'm like, oh, that sounds good. I need to work out how to, learn more about SEO or whatever it is. Or I just Google it and whatever comes up. Whatever my challenge is.
6 of this podcast is all about SEO, so I'll share it then, because I think that when we're doing it all by ourselves, that we have to learn all of these skills, and sometimes we don't necessarily know them. And I was saying this on another episode the other day, that to look outside your industry as well is really fascinating, because you can pull from different ideas. So
definitely. Well, I'm going today to meet, after this podcast, going to meet a new mentor who's in a totally different field to me, but we're going to work together. She's going to be my mentor. And when I first started learning about mentors, I always assumed I'd need someone who was an editor of a magazine so that they'd know exactly.
The devil wears Prada.
But then I realised it's not about that. It's about someone who's got loads of experience. And like you say, it can be in a totally different industry, but they can still inform you and teach you and guide you. Amazing. And
it's so important. And just to reach out, because those mentors don't necessarily knock on your door and say, hey, sweetheart, I'd like to look after you and do that. You have to do it yourself. Just as a final question, where would you like to be in 5 years' time?
I'd like to still be working part-time, so I have lots of time with my children while they're young. I don't know. I've only been planning for this year. The aim this year is to earn 100 grand.
Yes.
It was the same aim last year. It didn't happen, but I've got a list of publications that I want to write for, and I've been ticking them off.
Amazing.
But I'd like to write for the others. But I'm also doing a novel writing course at the moment. And so I'd like to, at the end of this year, have completed my novel, and perhaps to have completed a second or third in 5 years' time and had it published and become a bestseller.
Amazing.
I'd like to focus a bit more on creative writing alongside the money stuff.
Well, watch this space. Look how much you've done in, since your daughter's been born. And I think that's the thing that on on social media, there is that conversation of, mums being shoved out. But actually, if we are shoved out, we do our own thing anyway, and we're resourceful and we crack on regardless. And sometimes there can be that focus of going, oh my goodness, there's so much change to make. But actually, a lot of us are making the change, quietly, one step at a time behind their laptops at home in lounge pads.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so if people want to find out more about you and the early hour and your consultancy services, where should they go?
So theearlyhour.com is my website, but my freelance work there's lots of information at annieridout.com. Ridout is Ridout.
Brilliant. Yeah. Thank you so much for all your insight. I know that we're going to get lots of questions and continue the conversation. So we will do that over on Instagram when this episode goes live. Thank you so much, Annie. I really
Thanks, Nikki.
To you. Thank you.
And you.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you so much for listening. As always, you can go over to nickyraby.com/podcast, and I will link everything that we discussed in the show notes there. We will continue the conversation over on social media at Nicky Raby. Instagram is always a good place to start. And also, if you're interested in coaching with me one-on-one or doing one of my online courses, or you want to collaborate, whatever it might be, go to nickyraby.com/coaching. I look forward to hearing from you. Thanks so much for listening. As always, please rate and review and subscribe and share with a friend who you think might find this useful. I will see you very soon. Thanks again. Bye. Thank you so much for listening. I hope you enjoyed it, and I would love to hear what you thought of the episode and share any takeaways with me. Come and find me across social media at Nicky Raby, or you can visit the podcast page, nickyraby.com/podcast.